Great to see you. Great to have some visitors with us. I don't know whether you'll do or I'm new, but if not, great. Where are you guys from? The back row? Bristol. Well, someone's got to come from Bristol, so that's not so bad. I'm from Derby. Whereabouts are you from, sir?
Essex.
Essex. You're an Essex boy. But I think everybody else, just in case you don't know where we're all from, it would just be nice, because I know people live here, but you weren't always here. Where were you born? Savannah, where were you born? Where did you live?
I come from Italy.
Comes from Italy.
Devon.
Pardon?
Devon.
Devon?
Born in South Shields, Tyneside, and living in Italy and Canada.
Away with your pet.
In Lancashire.
In Lancashire, I can tell you're from Lancashire.
All in Bristol, going to Surrey.
You talk to me in Surrey.
Born in Hampshire.
He was born in the West Midlands.
Fantastic. Margaret?
Born in Derby.
Yeah, I was born in Derbyshire. Derbyshire born, Derbyshire bred, strong in arm and thick in head. That's what we used to say when we came from that part of the world. Don't know about you, but it's been hot. And oh, I forgot about some. I'm sorry. And that's the trouble whenever you do something spontaneously. Sorry. Great to see you guys. Let's say it to me slowly. Donaghy. When we moved to Scotland, we lived in Scotland, we still live in Scotland, I couldn't get the Scottish language for the first 3 months. How many times can you say excuse me when people are saying, hey, give me son, I'm going to, what are you talking about? But anyway, it's hot. So, these thoughts that I've got today obviously come out of, in the UK, for those that have come from the UK, it's been one of the hottest summers since the 70s. Wherever you're going, they're talking about drought. And things are, streams and brooks are drying up. And so this sermon, and the sermon next week, it's a 2-parter, is entitled, When Your Brook Dries Up. How do we cope in dry and dusty seasons of our life when it doesn't always flow as we wish it would? And I've got a reading for you from 1 Kings chapter 17. And Elijah, for those that know your Bible, no one's ever heard of him till this verse. It's like he goes, wow, here I am. He comes on the scene, and he's obviously a very confident man, as you'll read from verse 1. I don't know whether his confidence was in God or whether he was slightly cocky. I don't know. Others can make that decision. But it says in 1 Kings 17, now Elijah the Tishbite from Tisbe in Gilead said to Ahab, note, Ahab was the king. He's talking to a king. He's not talking to Joe Bloggs. He's not talking from someone from Donaghy or somewhere. He's talking to the king. And he says to the king, how about going to King Charles and saying this to him? He says, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except by my word. Now, that's either confidence in God, or you could read of that as this man got a bit of an arrogance problem, maybe as a young prophet. We don't know anything about him, but he comes on the scene, said, except by my word. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have ordered the ravens to feed you there. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Verse 7 then says, Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. So we can tell that he was a real prophet because what he said had come true. There was no rain and the brook dried up. And I think next week we'll focus more on the dried brook. But I will refer to it because I could have called this chapter or this sermon Jehovah Jireh, my provider. It talks about God, our provider. But he comes onto the scene and it's like his first word. I don't know about you. The first time I ever spoke, I was very pleased. It was a small congregation like this. I used to go to the Methodist circuit in Derbyshire, where sometimes more people went in my car than were in the church, which was very helpful. That when you were learning how to speak, that we talk and they would fall asleep on the back row. So I am watching you guys out there. You haven't got any excuse. I will assume you're praying for me if you fall asleep. But they'd fall asleep and I would try to preach and I'd try to get people to pay attention and I would try to put things in a way that would come over. And I learned some of the skills of communication in that way. But for him, his first word, his first job, he comes out of nowhere, he goes straight to the king and says, right, Kingy, just to let you know, the Lord has sent me, there's going to be no rain till I say so. That's a pretty dangerous thing to do when the king is Ahab. And it's no wonder the Lord then gives him instructions to go and hide, because he knows the king will be after him and there. So he goes to the king and he starts to give this strong prophecy. And I didn't know till this week. I always thought Baal, the nation was now worshipping Baal. Now I knew Baal was a fertility god, but I didn't know that one of the reasons they worshipped Baal, he was the god of rain. And you put this together and he says there's going to be no rain. And it's like already the gloves are off before we get to Mount Carmel, when they have the big fire attack and all the prophets are killed. Before then, already his target is Baal. There's going to be no rain. So is there, and in here I can see 6 principles. You'll be pleased to know I'm only going to do 3 today and 3 next week, about God's provision when things get tough and in dry times. And so we see first of all here, first principle of 6. When God guides, he provides. When God guides, he provides. What do I mean by that? In verse 1, he says, whom I serve. In verse 3, God says, leaves, he leaves. He obeys God. Verse 6, he says, he did what the Lord told him. You know enough about the first verses that he was letting God guide him. And when God guides you, he provides for you. Notice in the drought, it doesn't say God provided for everybody. God provided for him, because he was following God's wisdom and God's guidance. And we see here this principle that good sheep obey the shepherd. I don't know about you, the Bible's full of picture language, and the Bible often refers to as the sheep who follow the shepherd. And it's a lovely picture, apart from the fact sheep are dumb. Sheep are not the best picture of an animal to follow. And I was talking to a shepherd not so long ago, and he told me, sheep know more ways to get themselves killed than every other animal on my farm. Sheep fall into rivers, they fall into holes. I remember we were youth hostel and we saw this sheep got his head through a gate and he was stuck. And we were trying to get the thing to put, and he would not move his head. He'd only got to move his head and back out, but he wouldn't do it. He wanted his head to be like that. Dumb. I don't know whether you know this. Sheep cannot carry burdens. Sheep cannot navigate. They have no sense of direction. Sheep will settle for muddy water. They'll go, if the water where you put them in turns muddy, they haven't got enough sense to move to get some clean water. Sheep will not move without being shepherded into the next field. They will stay in the field they're put, and they'll eat all of the grass, and they'll go down to the roots, and they'll lose their teeth, front teeth by which they chew the cud, and they'll die. Sheep are dumb. Folks, you know where I'm going. Sometimes as Christians, we know so much about the Bible, we know so many, but sometimes Christians can do dumb things. They can make decisions because we don't follow the shepherd. Psalm 23, the famous psalm that we do at funerals, and I've been to too many of them recently, by the way, and I've been to about 4 or 5 funerals in the last month or so. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The problem with sheep, they sometimes don't go unless we have a shepherd. We have the shepherd to guide us, but we've got to do what he tells us. And that sounds so fundamental. I think you've come all this way from Bristol to say you need to do what God tells you. You've come all the way from to tell you to do what God tells you. You've come all the way from Richmond. You've come all the way from wherever you've come to do what God tells you. Yet it's the key to staying on the pathway, and it's the key to open the door to his provision in your life. So, first principle, he guides. When God guides, he provides. Second thing today, and I'm conscious it's warm, so I'm trying to go pretty quick. God's provision involves God's protection. So the first principle, when God guides, he provides. Second principle, God's provision involves God's protection. God's provision involves his protection. God says, go and hide. God knows that Ahab's not going to be very happy. God knows that this man's life who's burst on the scene, I'm the prophet, but he has to go and hide. Because God knows danger awaits him. And this little thought came to me this week. How many circumstances have we avoided because of God's protection? How many things have not happened that would have happened if we'd not listened to what God had said or known? We often talk about the big things, but sometimes I wonder when we get to heaven whether he'll say, you know, there's 4 times you should have died. There's 3 times you could have married the wrong person. There's things that you should have done in a different way, but God's protection has prevented things happening to you. Some 7 or 8 years ago, I was involved in a very serious car accident. My job used to be pastoring pastors. I looked after over 100 pastors in the UK, and one of our pastors was dying of cancer, and he was in Rill. And if you're going to have an accident in this country, I would suggest one of the worst places in the world to have it would be Rill. Rill was like a cemetery with lights. And I'm travelling over the hills into Rill, and there's a parked van. And he stopped on the road. I see a van, it's a cold winter's day. It's raining cats and dogs. I made a quick assumption that I could get past the parked car and get back in. I pulled out, pulled back in, but the van was coming faster than I thought, and he hit his brakes. And it was wet and rainy, and he lost control of a big transit van, and he crossed the reservation and came ploughing into me what seemed like about 40 or 50 miles an hour. Hit me head on. Car was a complete write-off. And the police came, and they said to me, "Are you hurt?" And I said, "Only my pride, I didn't feel any pain." He said, "Your car's absolutely total. Are you sure you're not in pain? Are you spitting blood? Is there anything that's not right with you?" "No, I feel fine." The only problem was I was in Rill. And I've got to get to Blackpool. and I had to get a taxi. £160 to get to jolly Blackpool. And the man came to pick the broken car up and he says, "Are you sure you're okay? I have seen people killed with less damage in your car." He says, "It doesn't make any sense. Are you sure you're okay?" And I'd love to say, well, a lifetime of having fast reflexes made me duck and made me tense myself, made me move in a certain way, so I rolled. I just went, "Ah!" as the car hit me. And I remember thinking, what are they going to tell Margaret if I'm dead? It was just horrifying. But I got to Blackpool about 1 in the morning, got up the next morning, hired a car and got on with my job. I had some bit of trauma, but that's not here for now. It was just one of those things. Here, but for the grace of God, I should be dead. And that's what I know about. But I wonder how many times when I've had a circumstance, I wonder if you can think sometime where if you'd have gone down that way in your life, if you'd have moved that way, something really bad would have happened. But because of God's grace and God's protection, things worked out differently for you. And I just think sometimes this is so important. I don't know about you, I believe in the ministry of angels. Sometimes you're nervous when you say that because I've talked to people who say they've seen angels. And they've often said to me, "I wish I'd never shared that story." Why? He says, "People think I'm weird now because they saw an angel." I believe the Bible says that the angel in Psalm 34 verse 7, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and he delivers them. God's blessing is not just about getting stuff. It's great when God gives you stuff. It's great when you get the perfect answer. It's great when things work. But sometimes God's blessing is about not getting stuff. God's blessing is not about getting the stuff that maybe you're looking after. I remember when we were young in our youth group, there was a girl in our youth group called Judy. Oh, she was a cracker. She was absolutely hot. In the biblical sense. She was just a gorgeous girl and she went out with this other guy and, had lots of trouble. I never went. God gave me a fantastic girlfriend in Margaret, who became my wife, and we've had the life. But when you're 15, you sometimes fall in, or you don't fall in love, but when you're 15, you fancy a shape. And it wasn't the shape that you know what I'm saying? God saves us some things and spares us from situations. He protects us in tough seasons. And by the way, this is just an add-on, a kingdom principle. If you want to go up in God, you have to first go down. Elijah had to climb down into the ravine. He had to go down. It's only in the next chapter, he's on the mountain of Mount Carmel and he's calling down fire from heaven and he's having his greatest day in his whole career. But folks, sometimes I think you said it last week, if you want to save your life, you must lose it. The principle of God's kingdoms are not the same. And if you want to be high in God's kingdom, the way to achieve it is by going low, by being a servant and being someone who is humble. I remember my first job in the Brethren, top job, putting the chairs out for the Sunday morning. For about 6 years, every Saturday night, we go up to the Gospel Hall, and in the Brethren days, we used to meet in a circle, and our job, put the chairs out. We leave there eventually, now filled with the Spirit, we go to the Elim Church. Guess what the first job was? Put the chairs out for the young people. They didn't recognise I was an incredibly good-looking, anointed preacher. They wanted someone to put the chairs out. Someone to do the task that needed to be done. And folks, if you are mainly a mature audience, you probably all know this, but if you want to be up in God's kingdom, the way up is down. It's the opposite way to what the world would say. about ambition and all of those things. To be a humble servant. Third principle. So the first principle, when God guides, he provides. Second principle, God's provision involves God's protection. And here's the third one. And this really was the one that all week has been on my heart and my mind. God provides what you need, not what you want. God provides what you need. You know, he provides for Elisha water from a brook and food from ravens. We'll talk more about ravens next week, but they're an unclean animal. He's got water and he's got meat. Daily. Same diet. Water, meat. Supernatural meets the natural. More about that next week. But water from the brook, food from ravens, bread and meat. Note, God gave him a brook and not a river. You know, it's wonderful when we have times of river living, when the Spirit of God is flowing and everything we touch is absolutely fantastic. You enjoy wonderful health, wonderful blessing. It's like you almost can't contain anymore. It's like you're surfing on the river of God. It's absolutely awesome. But God didn't give him a river. He gave him a brook. Now, this is where the thoughts, for those that could live in the UK, not only are there hosepipe bans, and I think particularly around the Bristol way, it's pretty bad, but rivers are drying up. You can go to places and see riverbeds that have come back to the surface. You know, there are some reservoirs where they buried villagers, the water levels coming so low, you can see the chimney tops of some of the villages that were buried 40 years ago because the river, the level of the water is gone. But God provides a brook. Brooks are notoriously unreliable. We go to we've been, have you ever been to Alice Springs in Australia? It's a quirky place. It's right in the Northern Territory where the Flying Doctor Service was. And they have a place called the Mighty Todd River, they call it. The Mighty Todd River, that's the name of the river. The only problem, it's the Australian sense of humour, there's been no water there for 40 years. So it's just a dry bed. And once a year, they have a race. And they put boats on it with wheels, and they row these boats, and they have a race on the Mighty Todd River because it's absolutely dry and parched, and it's just something that the quirky Australians do. It's as dry as a bone. But God provides, and this is the phrase, enough. God provides enough. And that word's been going by my head all week. That God provides enough. He provides enough water. You know, water is very important. I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago where a doctor was the preacher. And it was about 31 degrees in Paisley, in Scotland. Believe it or not, it was that hot. And this Nigerian doctor talked a bit about the importance of keep drinking water. And the importance of water. And she said, these are just sort of things that I made notes at, so just said, water does this. It's so important because one, water regulates your temperature. When you're getting hot, you have a drink to regulate your temperature. Water lubricates your joints. She said, water transports oxygen around your body through your bloodstream. She said, water flushes away waste from the body. Water is so important. Your brain. I don't know whether you've all got a brain. Looking around here, you've all got a brain. No, it's one, two nodding their heads, shaking their heads. Well, apparently your brain is 75% water. And you only have to lose 2%, and that's when you get brain fog. You know when your brain goes foggy, you can't think? Possibly, I don't know, the doctor said, not me, this is not Dr. Kevin, this was Dr. a Nigerian name I cannot pronounce, and a bit like Donegal. She was saying that that's how you get brain fog. And that's when headaches come. All I know is I must have had 5% less water in my brain for 30 years because I've got so much brain fog at times. It doesn't always work. But water is so important. God sends Elijah enough. There's a brook from which he drinks, and he drinks every night and every day. In good seasons, in bad seasons, God will give you enough. In good seasons and bad seasons, God will give you enough. It's not always a river, but God will give you enough. Thank God. Thank God. The phrase I got all week is learning to live with enough. Learning to live in the season of enough. You know, when we live in this world where we always want more, we always want, and thank God He's gracious. We have had the most amazing experiences with God. But I thank you, in the dry seasons, I've never been cracked. There's always been enough. He's the God of enough. Playa Blanca, this Sunday, hear this. God is a God who will give you enough to get through the day. Tomorrow, He'll give you enough to get through tomorrow. He'll give you enough to get through enough. It's difficult living in a season of enough when somebody else has got a river. What is it about human nature? We compare ourselves. The Bible says, do not covet what other people have. I know when I was a young person, I wanted to have this. And it seemed like I was always striving for something else. There was always, I wanted more. And part of that spiritually is good. But folks, sometimes we've got to realise that enough is enough. Enough is enough. How many millions will make you happy? How much stuff will bring happiness? We've just downsized. We've just moved to Paisley to an apartment. We've been to the tip about 200 times. We've been to every charity shop in East Kilbride to give away. I gave away 900 books, Christian books, to a church. We're trying to downsize for the next season of our life. And you know, when you come to throw something, oh no, we need that. Well, when did we last use it? 1972. Enough is enough. Sometimes we can get this comparison game with what other people have, but learning to live in the season enough. You know, some people settle for different looks. I'm just talking about being in the ministry 40 years. I see people who seem to settle for their hurt look. And they just permanently carrying the hurt of what someone said to them. Carrying some offence, and it's like they're just in the brook of being hurt. Some people I meet, they seem to camp at the brook of shame, and they did something that they deeply regret, and it's like they're self-flagellating for 30 years. That they're not prepared to apply the blood and to realise that they're forgiven, and they're living in a brook of shame. Some people live in a brook of disappointment. Oh, if only. If only. And you look at somebody else. It's one of the worst things you can do. When I was a young preacher, I wanted to preach like Dr. R.T. Kendall. Oh, have you heard Dr. R.T. Kendall? He was Westminster Chapel. He was just fabulous. Every word, it was like every word was measured and full of incredible wisdom. And I once went to a seminar with him, and I wanted to pick his brains about how he became such a great preacher. And he told the story of what he does when he prepares a sermon. Because it starts on Monday for next Sunday, and he goes to a cafe, and he'll sit and have a cup of coffee and read the text 30 times in Hebrew, in the Hebrew language. On the Tuesday, he goes back to the same cafe and reads the text 30 times in the Greek language. I'm starting to sweat because the only Greek word I know is kebab. So I am struggling to follow what he's doing. And I realised after about talking to him that I cannot be R.T. Kendall. I'm Kevin. And the gifts that God's given me are enough. I am never going to be a theologian. I'm just not. I'm not going to be able to give you 7 Greek words and all the different... That isn't me. But guess what? God's enough. He's given me enough to have a ministry that's lasted 40 years. It's enough. And one of the things that I'm trying to say to myself, because I've just been honest with you, my life is moving on now into this season where we've left the church. We felt God a bit like, I think, maybe talk about that next week, to go to another church. And the truth is, I'm no longer known as much as I was, because I've been retired a few years and people offer me seats now because of my bad leg. I'm no longer the man of power for the hour or whatever I was thinking I was. You come to the point where we're recognized to live in the season of enough. God's promised you enough. Can I tell you, I can't promise you a river. There are times when we do have rivers of blessing. But I believe on the authority of the Word of God, I can promise you a brook. I can promise you that God will always be enough. That God will bring you through the cancer. We just lost some friends recently, and we've journeyed with people in the depth of the valleys, and God's been enough. God has brought them through the difficulties. Thank God for enough. I need to finish. I'm going to do something that I don't often do. I'm going to sing. No, I'm not. You're going to please to know. I'm not going to sing. Many years ago, there was a group called the Gaithers. They're still going. I don't know whether you know. And they used to have what we call homecoming videos. And all week, one song's been going around my head. And it was sang by a man called Jake Hess. Now, maybe a name nobody here knows. Jake Hess sang at Elvis Presley's funeral. He was Elvis' favourite singer was Jake Hess. He was a gospel singer. And it's a lively song, but the main thrust of the song says, I've got the Lord, and that's enough. I've got the Lord. There are times when I don't have a dime, but God comes and I've got enough. And it's a jolly tune, but it's just that phrase about the enough of God that I think I want to land the sermon on and say to us today that God is a provider and that He's got a brook for you, and He doesn't want you to stay in dirty, dry water. He wants you to keep moving on, as we'll see next week, how He gets the word, the brook dries up and He has to move away. Sometimes when the brook dries up, you stay exactly where you are. And that's when the problems start with the bitterness and the hurt and the pain. But all I know is this. I can't promise you $1 million by Christmas. I can't say you'll live to be as old as Ralph or his daughter Claire. I can't tell you that you're going to have perfect health. I just can't do that. But I promise you, as I understand the Bible, that God will always give you enough. And it's that ability to settle when we're in those seasons where it's tough. That there'll be bread in the morning and water. There'll be meat at night. God will give you enough. And if you have the Lord, folks, you have enough. Let's hear Jake Hess sing this song.